Let's talk about Amanda Berry, a girl who went missing for 10 whole years before she made one of the most insane escapes in history. Yeah, that's right, missing for 10 years. So picture this, it's April 21st, 2003. Amanda Berry is a 16-year-old living in Cleveland, Ohio, and doing what every teenager does, getting ready for their job that basically pays nothing. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Just another day. Amanda finishes her shift at Burger King and heads out to walk home. But here's where things go sideways. As she's walking home, a 42-year-old guy named Ariel Castro pulls up in his Chevy Monte Carlo and offers her a ride. Now, Castro isn't some random stranger to Amanda. He's the father of one of her friends. So now you're probably thinking, what's the harm in getting a ride from your friend's dad? Well, yeah, sounds innocent enough, right? Well, it wasn't. Amanda gets in the car, and that's the last time anyone sees her for 10 years. After Amanda didn't come home that night, her family immediately knew something was wrong. I mean, she wasn't the kind of kid to just piss off without, telling anyone. Her mom, Luana Miller, reported her missing that day, which was April 21st. For once, someone in one of these stories calls the cops right away. Flyers went up, police were called, and the search began. I mean, in their heads, it's not like this girl just disappeared into thin air. Or did she? Because nothing was found, and slowly the family started to think that she might be dead. For years and years, Amanda's family held on to the hope that she was still alive. Her mom, Luana, especially, she never gave up despite the lack of any solid evidence. Luana even went on TV and pleaded for information, hoping someone, somewhere would know what happened to her little daughter. But as the years dragged on with no new information, hope started to fade away. By the way, here's where the story gets even darker. Amanda's family eventually held a vigil to mark her 18th birthday. 2 goddamn years after her disappearance, and even though people still had hope, many people started to fear the worst. So while all this is happening on the outside, where's Amanda? Get this, she's being held captive only 3 miles away from her home in Cleveland, Ohio, in locked up rooms on the 2nd story. Yeah, you heard me right. She was right there, hidden in plain sight, locked in the house of none other than Ariel Castro. Castro had kidnapped Amanda and taken her to his house on Seymour Avenue, where he had already been holding another girl, Michelle Knight, who was 21 years old and had also been held captive for 10 goddamn years. And it gets worse. He would later abduct a 3rd girl, Gina De Jesus, who was 14 when she was taken. By the way, she was taken in 2004. 3 women held prisoner in the middle of Cleveland. He used the same strategy for all 3, using his own daughter's friends' trust in him to take them. Now, let's talk about what Amanda went through during these 10 years. It's just sick. Castro, the sick monster, kept her in a room that was locked from the outside, often chaining her up and regularly hurting her. I mean, we're talking about some seriously dark stuff here. Physical, emotional, you name it, type of torture on a level that's hard to even comprehend. Amanda was kept away from the world, rarely allowed outside, and never permitted to contact her family ever again. And guys, in 2006, just a few years into her time as a hostage, Amanda gave birth to Castro's child, a daughter who was also forced to grow up in captivity. This whole thing is just messed up, man. Imagine being a prisoner for 10 years, not knowing if you'll ever be free, and then raising a child in the same horrible home. And Castro, he acted like this was normal. He kept up appearances in the community. He even attended vigils for Amanda and Gina after they went missing. Just disgusting. Now, you've probably been wondering, how was Amanda eventually found? On May 6th, 2013, 10 years after her abduction, Amanda finally saw the chance to escape. Castro had left the house for the first time, and Amanda noticed that the front door was unlocked, and she didn't hesitate. She ran to the front door, but there was a screen door that was still locked. Desperate, she started banging on the door and screaming for help. "Bang, bang, bang, help me!" she screamed. By sheer luck, a neighbor named Charles Ramsey heard her screams and rushed over. "Lady, the door's just a screen, punch through it." Well, this guy, he became an instant hero. He helped Amanda break through the door and called 911. The call that changed everything went something like this.
You need police, fire, or ambulance.
I need police.
Okay, and what's going on there?
I've been kidnapped and I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here. I'm free now.
Okay, stay there with those neighbors. Talk to the police when they get there.
Okay.
And
I'm Amanda Berry. I've been on the news for the last 10 years.
That one phone call blew this whole case wide open. Police rushed over to the house and rescued the two other women, Michelle Knight and Gina De Jesus. In one night, the whole thing came crashing down on Ariel Castro, and he was thankfully arrested that same day. But that's not the end of the story. After Amanda and the others were rescued, the details of their captivity came to light. And it was worse than anyone could have imagined. Castro was charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and other similar charges. And in July 2013, he accepted a plea deal that gave him life in prison plus 1,000 years, you sick. Whew, God. And well, Castro didn't make it long behind bars because just 1 month into his sentence, he was found dead in his cell. The official report said that he unalived himself. But F it, who the hell cares? Rotten hell, buddy. Now, I'ma just be honest. If I was held captive for 10 years, I wouldn't have the strength to do what Amanda did. She has since gone on to live her life, raise her daughter, and she even wrote a book about what happened to her titled Hope, a Memoir of Survival in Cleveland. She fought back, she survived, and now she helps raise awareness for other missing and exploited people. Talk about one hell of a strong woman. Next up is Sierra Joffin, a 20-year-old college student from rural Ohio. Well, let's just say this one gets dark real fast. So Sierra was a typical 20-year-old. Born on February 11th, 1996, she grew up in Metromora, Ohio, a quiet, small town where everyone knew everybody. She was a student at the University of Toledo studying human resources. She was very smart, athletic, and a friendly young woman. Now imagine that, a girl with her whole life ahead of her, and then in a blink of an eye, everything changes. It was a normal summer day, July 19th, 2016. Sierra had spent the whole day with her boyfriend, Josh Kolosinski. They'd been riding bikes together on a country road, just enjoying the sun. They parted ways around 6:45 p.m. and Sierra headed toward her home. But the problem was that Sierra never actually made it home. And well, her family didn't waste any time. They knew something was off when she didn't show up. So they reported her missing that night. A massive search began almost immediately with local police, volunteers, and even the FBI getting involved. This wasn't just some casual search. No, there were helicopters, K9 units, you name it, they used everything. The entire community got together with hundreds of people scouring the area looking for any sign of Sierra. Everyone hoped she'd gotten lost or maybe she had an accident on her bike, but they just wanted her to be okay. And then something scary was found. 3 days after she went missing, investigators found Sierra's purple bike in a cornfield abandoned. There were signs of struggle nearby. Disturbed dirt, tire tracks, and drag marks. The evidence of a struggle made the cops think that someone actually took her. It became clear that Sierra hadn't just wandered off. So you're probably wondering, who could have done this? Well, on July 22nd, 2016, police arrested a man named James Worley, a local farmer who had just lived a few miles away from where Sierra's bike was found. Now you're probably thinking, why him? Well, it turns out that this wasn't Worley's first run-in with the law. Oh, officers, this is the first time, I swear. That's what they all say, yeah, creep. Yeah, no. Back in 1990, he had been convicted of, you guessed it, abducting another woman. He had kidnapped a woman named Robin Gardner, who luckily managed to escape and get help. Worley served 3 years in prison for that crime, but somehow he was back out living a quiet life in the same area. Who keeps letting these creeps back out? I mean, how does someone with a record like that just go back into society like nothing happened? Yeah, my bad, guys. I won't kidnap again. Now, here's where things get even more disturbing. When police searched Worley's property, what they found was just gross. There was a hidden room in his barn filled with restraints, duct tape, zip ties, and other creepy-ass tools. It was clear that Worley had planned what he was going to do. And then came the discovery of what no one wanted to hear. On July 22nd, 2016, just 3 days after Sierra went missing, police were searching high and low for any sign. They were scouring the property and came across a cornfield, searching every single inch. They looked at each other and walked through. Eventually, to their horror, they found some disturbed ground and something was buried down there. They started digging and they found her lifeless body just laying there. She had been tied up, gagged, and the autopsy revealed that she had even been choked. It was a brutal end to a massive search. So who is this guy? James Worley wasn't just some criminal or some stranger to the area. No, this was a man who had been living in the same community for years, doing odd jobs, farming, and keeping a low profile. He had no significant interactions with the law since his 1990 abduction charge, and people around town didn't even really think much of him. But by the way, remember that earlier crime I mentioned when Worley abducted Robin Gardner? Well, it was later found that he used a nearly identical method to what happened with Sierra. He knocked Gardner off her bike, forced her into his trunk, and restrained her. Fortunately, Gardner escaped before he could do any further harm. Worley's trial began in 2018, and let me tell you, it was a goddamn roller coaster. The prosecution had evidence from his property, including the restraints and the secret room, which was presented in court, and it was clear that this was very well thought through. And honestly, the courtroom was filled with Sierra's friends and family. People who had known her, loved her, and now they had to sit through the gruesome details of how her life had been stolen. The defense tried to argue for leniency, claiming that Worley's actions didn't warrant the death penalty. But yeah, that didn't fly with the jury. On March 27th, 2018, James Worley was found guilty of Sierra's murder and sentenced to death. He is currently on death row, awaiting execution, and you sick motherfucker, you deserved it. Alright, let's talk about one of the most shocking missing person cases you've probably ever heard or you're going to hear. This is the story of Maddie Clifton, an 8-year-old girl from Jacksonville, Florida, whose disappearance in 1998 led to the discovery that no one saw coming. So it all started on November 3rd, 1998. She lived in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood, the kind of place where kids still played outside, rode their bikes, and stayed out until the streetlights came on. Good old days before the internet. Anyways, on that day, Maddie was outside playing, hitting golf balls around the neighborhood, just being a kid. Her mom, Sheila Clifton, thought it was another ordinary afternoon, but then everything changed. Maddie didn't come home that day. She was playing outside with her neighbors, but after that, she just vanished. When her parents realized that she wasn't home by dinner, they started looking for her, and within hours, a full-blown search was underway and the cops were called. Local news stations ran stories about her disappearance. I mean, people thought that she may have wandered off, got lost, or even worse, had been abducted. Once the police were involved, they knocked on doors, interviewed neighbors, and searched everywhere they could possibly think of. One neighbor who stood out early was a 14-year-old boy named Joshua Phillips, who lived across the street from the Cliftons. Something was just off about him, but they couldn't tell what. When the officers asked Joshua and his mom if they'd seen anything, they both just said no, just like everyone else. Joshua even helped with the search efforts, walking around the neighborhood looking for Maddie, like he had done nothing at all. The police had no reason to suspect him at first. For nearly a whole week, no one knew where Maddie was. Her poor parents were terrified, and every day that passed made people think that she wouldn't be alive. But then, on November 10th, 7 days after Maddie's disappearance, everything changed. Joshua Phillips's mother, Melissa Phillips, was cleaning his room, and here's where things take a chilling turn. She noticed that something was off about his waterbed. There was a strange smell and liquid leaking from it. When she inspected it more closely, she made a horrific discovery. And it wasn't his special sock. In the base of the waterbed was Maddie Clifton's dead body. Yeah, you heard me correctly. The entire time Maddie had been missing, her body was right there in the room of the boy who was helping search for her. Melissa immediately called the police, and when they arrived, they arrested Joshua Phillips on the spot. So, how did Maddie end up in Josh's room? Well, according to Joshua's confession, it all started as an accident, or so he claimed. He said Maddie came over to play that day, and while they were hitting golf balls, one accidentally hit Maddie in the eye, causing her to cry. Afraid that his dad would come home and get angry because Joshua wasn't allowed to have friends over while his parents were out, Joshua panicked. And I mean, panic is one thing, but what Joshua did next was beyond just panicking. He said that in a panic, he dragged Maddie inside his house and tried to quiet her down by hitting her. But when that didn't work, he strangled her with a phone cord. And if that wasn't awful enough, Joshua then took a knife and stabbed her multiple times to make sure she was dead before hiding her body under a goddamn waterbed. All of this happened while his father was out of the house. When his dad returned, Joshua acted like nothing had happened and even slept in the same room where Maddie's lifeless body was hidden for a week. Joshua's trial began in 1999. Here was a 14-year-old boy who had just committed one of the most gruesome murders ever. Well, the prosecution argued that this wasn't just an accident. Joshua had deliberately killed Maddie and went to great lengths to cover it up. Which, by the way, I'ma just say it, I agree. The defense then tried to argue that Joshua wasn't fully in control of his actions, pointing to his difficult time at home. Joshua's father was reportedly very strict and there were allegations of emotional abuse, but still, that didn't really explain the crime. By the way, the most heartbreaking part about all of this is that Maddie's family had to sit in that courtroom and listen to the details of how their little girl was killed and hidden in the house of a boy that they thought they could trust. There are truly no words that could describe that type of pain. In the end, Joshua Phillips was rightfully convicted of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole despite even his age. Today, Joshua Phillips is still in prison serving out his life sentence. And over the years, there have been many attempts to appeal the sentence. He says that he should get the chance at parole due to his age at the time of the crime. And well, in 2012, the Supreme Court ruled that mandatory life sentences for juveniles without the possibility of parole were unconstitutional. This ruling has given Phillips and others like him the chance to have their sentences reviewed. He could actually get out. But yes, hold on, till this day, Joshua Phillips is still behind bars and there's no certainty that he will ever be released. Now, Maddie wasn't able to escape Joshua, but sometimes what's scarier is that some of the victims of kidnapping have to live the rest of their lives with the pain. And I talk about more stories like that in this video right here, where I talk about kidnapped victims who escaped death.